Hey, somebody needs to bait their hook. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. The Professional Noticer is sponsored this week by our friends at Tucker ATV. You know, the sheer variety of power sport products at Tucker ATV will blow your mind. Hustler turf equipment, the entire line of Echo power tools, and of course Tucker ATV carries every make and model of Polaris ATVs. They even have the huge Polaris side-by-sides and the even huger Ranger Crew. And you have to see the showroom. Taxidermy, antique displays, and an indoor porch with a porch swing, a comfortable chair or two, and television and free coffee. You need to stop in and see Shannon and Lisa Tucker. They treat customers like family, which is why folks from 14 states have done business with Tucker ATV. Highway 43 North in Jackson, Alabama. Tucker ATV, the small town business with the national reputation. Observations and answers. That's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And as you know, if you are a regular listener, regular viewer, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both observations and answers. And we have that again today. We have a longtime friend of mine that has kind of changed profession. She spent 32 years as an executive for a Fortune 50 company. She was actually with State Farm Financial Services, and just the insurance and financial services actually. And she was a honcho, and that's how I met her, actually. Now she is retired from that, even though she's too young to retire, but she's an author. So please welcome Susie Pinkard. Hey, Susie.
Hey, Andy. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really an honor.
Hey, I am thrilled. Now, you know, I've got to say that of all the speaking engagements that I've done, probably 30 years of speaking, I could count on two hands in 30 years the people that I have really kept up with that were executives that brought me in to speak. And you are one of those. I was so blown away by you when we first met, just at your ability with the people that worked for you and just the leadership. And so then to find out that you stay part of the year down in Orange Beach, Alabama. And so we worked several times together with State Farm, and then we started connecting around here. And then you said, I'm going to write a book. And I'm like, yes, you are the person to write a book. And I'll just tell you, before we even start really talking to Susie, the book is out. Stainless Steel Butterfly, Building a Strong Foundation So You Can Fly. Susie, I am so proud of this book.
Thank you.
And I know this was built around a story of your stepfather and the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. Tell us that story, and then I want to talk about that poem maybe just a little bit.
Okay. Well, so the way the poem was introduced to me, I was a teenager, and my mother had remarried Ray Dempsey after our father died. And he had just this really incredible ability to connect with people.
Right.
And I talk about this in the book, in the introduction, about there were 7 of us. I'm the youngest. And so him walking into the role of a stepfather for 7 children and figuring out how to love all of us individually and relate to us individually was pretty miraculous. But what he did, and he zeroed in on my lack of confidence in myself. And as a young girl, I did. I lacked a lot of confidence. I don't know why, but I just did.
Sure,
I guess that's a teenage thing. But the way the poem was introduced, and I talk about this in the introduction, is that I was telling this tale about some of my friends being in like a little soap opera drama, dispute or something. And I was just like fussing about it in the kitchen. And he just starts quoting the poem. And I had heard him quote poems a lot, but
Now, let me stop you here. You remember the poem, don't you? You remember, because I can just imagine him starting, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when everyone doubts you, but make allowance for their doubting too. You remember this poem. I mean, this is brilliant. All right, go ahead.
yes. So he starts quoting the poem as I'm talking to my mother. And then I'm like, what did you say? And then he didn't answer. He just keeps going. And he goes through the entire poem. And when he gets to the end of it, he said, I want you to memorize this poem and I want you to live your life by it. And so that's how it was first introduced. And so I did. I memorized the poem and he would check me all the time. He'd start part of the line and I'd finish it, or I'd say one and he'd finish it. So it was just a really interesting time in my life because I was getting ready to go off to college and he knew that I really needed a good solid foundation. So I think,
I see people, I have a lot of people that tell me they're writing a book or want to write a book. I hear this a lot. And the vast majority of them, number one, can't write. But then probably another majority of them, they have an idea for a book, but they don't have something that needs to come out for other people. And just in correspondence with you, I knew you could write. And then as you told me this, as you told me about your ideas before you actually began writing, you were saying you're going to take a piece of that poem because you've lived a life now. You've lived a life. You had a very successful marriage, and then Chuck got sick and passed away. You have two children. You had an incredibly successful career. Now you've got people that you care for, people you're still leading and making a difference to, and you have something to say. And so I love the way you lined this out because every chapter is another story of your life that illustrates a piece of this poem.
right.
And Stainless Steel Butterfly, it sounds like that might be a woman's book, but I read it and it impacted me. I mean, this is not just a woman's book. I would say maybe at first it might be a woman's book, and then all the dads who have daughters need to read this book. And then all the husbands who have wives need to read this book. I'm so proud of you for this. And I'm also, this is a tool in my arsenal now. So tell me where the Stainless Steel Butterfly name came from.
So at the end of the poem, it says, if you can fill the one unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that is in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So when Ray gave me the poem, I was just a little smart aleck, and I said, I won't be a man. And then he said, you will be a stainless steel butterfly. And all of those years later, he would come back and say things like, oh, there you go, being a stainless steel butterfly. And so at the time, I didn't really connect stainless steel butterfly. I just knew it meant, you got to be balanced. You could have to have some hard edges, but some soft edges, That's kind of what was going through my mind. But over the years, I really thought a lot about that and what it really meant and what it could mean. So when I got ready to write the book, I knew the title before I ever even put the content together. I knew what it was going to be. And then I thought, okay, where am I at this stage in my life and what do I want to talk about? Because there's so many subjects.
What started you at this stage in your life going, this is what I need to do?
Well, it's an interesting dilemma in my brain, and I think I finally figured it out. After I retired, I was restless, and I thought, at that point, but I've retired now when I'm at kind of the peak of my knowledge and understanding, and I guess a little bit of the experience that I had and how to coach people, that were moving into leadership and executive roles. I thought, okay, I'm in the best place. Why am I not doing this anymore? But it was the right thing for the right reasons and the right timing. But I was like wrestling with that. And then I thought, well, this is just your ego talking to you. You're just going to have to get okay. You're retired. Get
but
okay.
You weren't out of gas. You had a full fuel tank. You just didn't know where to go.
That's right. Exactly. And so the other part of that, which now I know looking back at it, this was really something more spiritual than it was my brain. And the only way I know to say it is I think God got into my brain to get into my heart. Because what I really was feeling was the tug and the need to write the book. Because I think about it in the way that you just set it up earlier. I've lived now. I'm 61, soon to be 62. I couldn't have written this book 20 years ago because 80% of what's in the book had not yet happened.
Right.
So it's like this, the way I've heard it described most recently is this idea of convergence. It's like all these things that you've lived and things that you've experienced finds its way at the right point in time for you to then share it with the hope and belief that it's going to make a difference to somebody else. So
that's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And I remember the first time I read this, you had just manuscript pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, that I guess one way that I know that a book or something I'm reading has hit me is if faces go through my mind, names and faces go through my mind when I'm reading it. Man, I got to make sure so-and-so hears this, make sure so-and-so sees this. I know you just finished recording the audio. That's not out yet,
right.
but this is out.
Yes.
I mean, we can go to Amazon and get this right now. So, what has, and I'm curious about you as a writer, because you're a first-time author. And so what has your experience been like? I mean, some people are so baffled by the experience or confused, or they feel like they've been ripped off, and then what has been your experience?
Well, the first thing I will tell you is I know one thing I think over my lifetime that I've been able to, with confidence, say is that I know myself pretty well. I know where my strengths are. I know where my gaps are. And I've always had the belief that when you know where your gaps are, then you fill in with resources and people around you to help you stay focused on what you're the best at.
Right.
I'm the best at, in this scenario, telling my story, telling it, getting it down, organizing it, putting it together. But then I also got a publishing company to work with me, which offered various coaches, like storytelling coaches, branding coaches, to help me get really, really clear. And the experience was great. I didn't feel at any point in time that I was doing something that was hard.
Wow. Okay.
It came together very, very well, to the point that when it was done,
I've written more than 20 of these things, and they all seem hard to me. So I'm glad it wasn't hard for you.
No, I'm saying it was not easy, but I never felt like, oh my God, this is too hard.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Because of all the resources that I made sure that I surrounded myself with, the various coaches and things of that nature.
One of the things that you do so well in this, and I am such a proponent of story. Because there are books that purport to tell us how to live our lives and what to do, and yet some people manage to change our lives through story. And Jones told me one time, he said, experience is not the best teacher. Other people's experience is the best teacher. And every chapter in this is a story. And I was fascinated by the story. I was captivated by the story, but then I'm learning too. And so I think when somebody leads with a story like you have, as well as you have in this book, and the book doesn't look intimidating, it doesn't look like I'm going to have a hard time getting through this. And I'll just tell you, you will read this book quickly because you won't be able to put it down because one story leads to another. And I do have a smart aleck question I want to ask you in a few minutes about one of the stories, okay? But I'll just save that smart aleck question for a little bit. Using this poem "If" was interesting. Did you have to, as you were going through that poem again in your mind and lining up the stories to go with the lines, did you struggle with any of that? Did you, I remember when I was writing The Traveler's Gift, the thing just seemed to pour out, but the biggest challenge I had was deciding whether to go with Abraham Lincoln or Winston Churchill in that first book. Because I loved them both, and I had this story, I had the principle that I wanted to do, but I struggled with how to apply it. Did you struggle with any of that?
Yes, I did. The first 3 months of what I consider this to be sort of the project or the process, I really spent a lot of hours. I mean, I have my little box here. I don't know if you want to see it.
Yeah, I want to see it.
So, I started with, actually, you gave me this idea. You said, get a big whiteboard and sticky notes and put all your ideas. Well, this is much cruder than that, but it's
actually much more organized than that.
Well, so once I got my mind around what each chapter was going to be about, and then I start thinking about, well, what story do I want to tell? Who do I want to highlight? That was the time that I spent probably 3 months going through. And then really thinking about the line, like, for example, in one of the lines it says, being lied about, don't deal in lies, being hated, don't give way to hating, yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. I didn't want to write a story about hating or lying. I mean, I could have, but I thought, and this is kind of where I put my thoughts really in, how do I flip that and make it a bit more positive and make it about, instead of lies, hate, and being somewhat arrogant, I flipped it and I said, let's talk about love. Let's talk about compassion. Let's talk about humility.
Right. The poem says don't do those things. So you went with it, didn't go with those things.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I could have, but I struggled with that. So I flipped it. And each time that I would spend the time thinking about the story, then I started writing the stories and then started with these cards. And, and that's how I did it. And then, of course, I had several sessions with the different coaches from the team that I was working with, and they would quiz me. And during those conversations, I would think of things that I thought, that's what I need to be talking about right there. But it was the way they would ask me questions that would help me come to what we agreed to be the best stories.
Can I say this? Do you mind?
No, not at all.
Matt, look at this. You see this? I mean, Matt knows he knows my version of this, and it's not nearly as, this is concise, it's organized. I have to have a big room to do mine because I have them spread all over the floor, I've literally got them spread everywhere. And so this, maybe I could do this. This looks so nice. And one day, when this book has sold 5 million copies, you can take these things and autograph the back of them and give them to people to frame or whatever, or save them for your kids. And, 'cause I always think that I save some notes from every book, and I think, when I croak, my kids can maybe sell them on eBay and,
Yeah.
take somebody to lunch. But these are awesome. And that'll go, what a great trophy.
Well, that was also because I was also traveling a lot. I was with my daughter in Orlando. I was in Atlanta with my son. Then I was back down here in Orange Beach. And then I was across the country doing in other countries. So that traveled very well as opposed to something more.
That's how I would display it in your office.
I like it.
On a shelf with your book above it. That is awesome. So the book has been out for about a month now. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've just joined us, we're talking about Stainless Steel Butterfly, Building a Strong Foundation So You Can Fly with the author, Susie Pinkard. And we're going to have on the show notes where everybody can connect with you and buy the book and everything. But what have you heard? Have you heard anything from readers?
I have. In fact, when I first put it on Facebook, I immediately started getting lots of response. But I actually put a teaser out 6 months prior. So I'm like, okay, now it's ready. And so I started getting all these different comments. I'm buying mine, just ordered mine. And then I started getting messages through Messenger with people who didn't have my phone number. Those that have phone numbers for my cell was getting texts.
Right.
And it's just really been overwhelming, just really, really humbling that someone, when they message me about the book and tell me, they always say, I did it in one sitting, or I read it in 2 sittings.
Yeah.
Couldn't put it down. I've heard that, which I like to hear that because it tells me that they're engaged.
Yeah.
And they'll tell me what part resonated with them. I really like the last chapter because you talk about intentionality and I want to live my life more intentional. Those types of comments.
Here's something that would be curious to me and maybe curious for you to think about, because you're hearing now a lot of what people are taking from the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so are you surprised at any of them? And here's my context for asking this question. When I wrote The Traveler's Gift, I was absolutely sure that everybody's favorite part of the book would be the Joshua Chamberlain part,
Mm-hmm. because
that was my favorite part. And through the years now, I have come to understand if there is one of those 7 that people have as their favorite, I wouldn't know what it is because it's almost equally divided between the 7. That somebody loves this one, somebody loves this one, this one spoke to somebody. So are you surprised? Do you have a favorite part in it? Do you have a part that you thought was going to be everybody's favorite part?
I never really thought about what's going to be their favorite part, but probably my favorite part is the final chapter.
Okay.
It's the one where I talk about taking myself out of everything familiar for, those several weeks that I spent over in Paris, and how in that window of time, being away from everything that was familiar made me come more back to who I am and who I've always been. So I thought that might resonate, but I also wanted to be careful that I didn't give the impression you have to go somewhere to do that work or to have that experience. But I love this. I probably one of mine that I like, a lot. I love the stories of sharing about my husband, Chuck, and our life and our family's life and our journey with his illness. Those were hard to write, but on some level, it was really good for me to write those stories. I felt like somebody's going to learn something in each one of these chapters, but we all know people that are touched by loss.
Right.
And that was, while I wouldn't say they're my favorite because I enjoyed, I think that they can be very impactful.
In the foreword of this book, it says, this work is appropriate for young people, teachers, the newly married, those who are searching, pastors in need of sermon material that connects with ordinary people, and those who have never entered a church in their lives. In closing, I can only urge you to read this book with a highlighter as if searching for answers that will change your life. And if you have the courage to think deeply about what you've highlighted, your life will indeed be changed. That's in the foreword to this book. You know who said that?
I know.
Me.
You did.
I wrote the foreword to this. I was so blown away by this book that I wanted to write the foreword, and I appreciate you allowing me to do that. This, I can honestly say, you get this book, you read the first 10 pages. If you aren't hooked, put it down. But you're going to be hooked. I mean, it's great. So I got to ask you one question before we end. Now, Chuck, your husband, was not just a golfer. He was a great golfer.
Yes, he was.
He went to college playing golf and played many tournaments and was headed for the senior tour.
Yes.
And you met him when y'all were in college, right?
Right.
And you started dating there, and he's playing college tournaments because he's on the golf team. He's on scholarship. And it was, I think, the first golf tournament that you went to follow him.
Right.
I laughed out loud at this part of the book. Did you really walk across the sand trap to say hi to him?
I sure did. I didn't get through the sand trap. He stopped me midway. I was heading across the sand trap to the green to give him a big hug because he just made this really great putt. But he stopped me midstream, and I just froze. He was so bent out by that point because I had made so many mistakes. First time I'd ever been on a golf course.
That is so. That's something that should be in a movie, because when I read that scene, I laughed out loud, and I went back and read it again, and then I just wanted to ask you, did you really do that? Because it sounds so funny.
Yeah, I really did, and walked in the fairway with people screaming at me, which I learned later they were screaming for. That happened before I walked through the sand trap. So it was just a disastrous
You thought they were screaming at me. They were going, four, get out of the way. You're going to get hit.
Yes.
And you're just like, hey, this is the easiest way to get there.
That's right. Well, I was late for his tee time, and he told me, don't be late. Of course, I was late. And so, I'm trying to catch up to where his team is, and I just cut right out into the fairway because I could see better. And so...
Man, well, you guys, you got to get this book. It's equal parts funny, tender, heart-touching, and incredibly observant. This is a deep thinking book. I put that in the first bit of the foreword I wrote. Deep thinkers make thinking deeply look easy. It is not. It is, however, a process available to mere mortals like you and me, and no secret code is required to enter this incredibly valuable portal of understanding. And so, Susie, you have always impressed me as a deep thinker that could explain complicated things simply. And I've always appreciated that about you. And I want to congratulate you with this, and anything that I can do to help, I'm going to help.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Andy. I think the hardest part about the whole thing was trying to explain the concept of the book and what it would be and how it would come together. And I finally think I wrapped my mind around how I would say to explain this book. I think it is a book about embracing the wholeness of life and everything that comes with it.
That's excellent. I think we've got a name for this podcast, The Stainless Steel Butterfly. That's the book, and that is you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to all the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, We've reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you. Seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Flag material for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by the Liver Association. American farmers promoting liver at every meal and at snack time too. Friend, did you grow up with a negative attitude toward liver? Well, you're not alone. But times and taste have changed, and the Liver Association is leading mealtimes in a wonderful direction. Liver for breakfast is what's on the menu for special times. Our bacon-shaped liver is just perfect for surprising guests. For lunch, it's liver sandwiches on white bread with a side order of liver cubes in Jell-O. For dinner, it's liver again, this time with creamed liver over toast or a nice liver casserole made with ground liver and cream of mushroom soup. For dessert, dried liver crumbled over ice cream will please your children no end. So treat your family well. Support the Liver Association by joining today and receive a pound of liver jerky as our gift to you. That's the American Liver Association, presented by the Chicken Gizzard Foundation.